Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. The topic today is liver cirrhosis. Cirrhosis is the end result of multiple injuries to the liver, and these injuries may be in the form of inflammations, toxins, chemical, metabolic disorders, or biliary disorders. So end result of all these injuries is liver cirrhosis. Usually this is considered to be irreversible, but latest studies have shown that if you control the main factor, etiological factors, and you give specific treatment, so in some circumstances the process may be slightly reversible. But for all practical purposes, when the patient has progressed to this stage of cirrhosis, usually it is irreversible liver damage. The term cirrhosis is derived from the Greek word keros, which means orange or tawny color, and osis is the condition. And this term was first used by Laennec in 1819 to describe the gross appearance of the cirrhotic liver. It appears orange, yellow, and on this appearance it was given the name of cirrhosis. It is basically defined in pathological terms, and when you have simultaneous evidence of three elements in liver histopathology: necrosis, fibrosis, and regeneration in the form of nodule, then we use the term liver cirrhosis. Yes, WHO defines it as a diffuse process which is characterized by liver necrosis and fibrosis and conversion of normal liver architecture into structurally abnormal nodules that lack normal liver organization. So necrosis, fibrosis, and regeneration and nodular formations and disturbing the whole architecture of the liver is main feature of liver cirrhosis. This is the appearance of normal liver. The largest organ of the body weighs about 1200 to 1500 grams. Overall, it comprises of 1/80 of the total body weight, and anatomically it is divided into two lobes by the falciparum ligament, the right lobe and the left lobe. And the right lobe has two further segments which are more specifically given the name of caudate lobe and quadrate lobe. So some authorities, they talk about four lobes of the liver: right lobe, left lobe, caudate, and quadrate lobes. But anatomically it consists of mainly two lobes, the right and left, and the division is by the attachment of the falciparum ligament. But on the basis of the blood supply and functional anatomy, the liver is divided not by the falciparum ligament, but by the position of the main hepatic vein and its tributaries, again into right and left liver, and each lobe is then further subdivided into two sectors. The right lobe has got anterior and posterior sectors, and the left lobe has got lateral and medial segments. So two lobes, and there are four sectors, and then it further subdivided into segments, and these segments, they are used radiologically to describe the actual anatomical position of the various liver lesions, and this is also helpful for liver resections, for the treatment of hepatocellular carcinoma, and for the liver transplant. The caudate lobe is segment number 1. The lateral lobe of the lateral sector of the left lobe is segment 2 and 3, and the medial sector of the left lobe is segment 4, and then on the right side the anterior sector consists of segment 5 and 8, and the posterior segment consists of sectors 7 and 6. It performs various functions, and there are total 6 major functions which are assigned to the liver. It has got metabolic functions. It is involved in the metabolism of fats, carbohydrate, and proteins. It has got synthetic functions, it synthesizes albumin and the clotting factors. It has got secretory functions, secretes bile salts and bile acids. It has got excretory functions, excretes bilirubin. Then it has got storage functions, various vitamins, they are stored in the liver. And then it has got detoxification factors. It is involved in the metabolism and detoxification of the drugs and other body products. On the basis of the size of the nodule, traditionally cirrhosis is divided into two main categories: micronodular cirrhosis, which is also known as portal cirrhosis, or Lennox cirrhosis, which is commonly seen in the alcoholics. Here the size of the nodule is small, less than 3 millimeter, and the fibrous septa, they are also small, and they surround each liver lobule. So small lobule, the size less than 3 millimeter, and they consist of individual lobule. And commonly patient with alcohol, patient with malnutrition, they suffer from this macronodular type of cirrhosis, where the liver grossly appears as smooth, finely granular, small and firm. And when you have massive necrosis and toxic damage to the liver, like after hepatitis B and C and other type of toxic injuries, then the type of cirrhosis is macronodular, where the septa, they are large and thick, and usually they surround multiple liver lobules. So the size of nodule is more than 3 millimeter, and grossly liver appears as hard, firm, irregular and coarse. And sometimes you can have a mixed picture of both micronodular and macronodular. Basically the micronodular type of cirrhosis, when they show regeneration, then they get converted into mixed picture or into macronodular type of cirrhosis. Most of the patients, they are asymptomatic, and usually they are diagnosed on the basis of routine physical examinations or routine laboratory tests or on radiological assessments like ultrasound or some other investigations. It is 11th leading cause of death in the world, and number of deaths, they are there annually because of liver cirrhosis and its complications. And another very dreadful complication is the development of hepatocellular carcinoma, which is additional cause of mortality in the patient with cirrhosis. Pathologically, the liver cirrhosis consists of three abnormalities. The hepatocellular necrosis is followed by fibrosis, which may be in the form of large septa and bridging type of fibrosis. And then when there is regeneration, it is in the form of nodules, and parenchymal nodules are as small or large, they are there. And because of this fibrosis and nodular regenerations, the entire liver architecture gets disturbed. The sinusoidal blood flow, the whole vasculature and other things, they get disturbed. So mainly the features, clinical manifestations of liver cirrhosis, they result because of these abnormalities: loss of liver cells, portal hypertensions, and the development of anastomosis between the portal and between the systemic circulations. So pathologically, the main features are regenerative nodules, and then fibrosis, abnormal liver architectures. The liver cells themselves, they show abnormalities in the form of pleomorphism, dysplasia and hyperplasia, and grossly the liver appears irregular, yellowish orange color. It is small, firm and hard. Left side is the normal histology where you can see the portal vein, the portal triad and the hepatic veins, and on the large size is the picture of cirrhosis where you can see the fibrous septa which are surrounding the nodules and they are disturbing the liver architecture, the absence of the portal triad and abnormal architecture of the liver. A close look at the nodules, and this is a macronodule which is involving multiple liver lobules, but you don't see any fine details of these lobules. There is loss of the architecture. You can't see any portal triad, and similarly the hepatic veins cannot be localized. Very briefly about the pathogenesis. The process starts with the necrosis of the liver cells. This leads to formation of fibrosis, progressive fibrosis, and then there is attempt at regeneration which results in the formation of the nodules. The main role which is played in the pathogenesis of the fibrosis is the hepatic stellate cells. This cell, which is containing large droplet of the vitamin A, you can see in the form of retinal droplets. Actually 60 to 70% of the total vitamin A of the body is stored in these stellate cells, which is also known as the fat storing cells, Ito cells and pericytes, and this is located between the endothelial cells which is lining the hepatic sinusoid and the hepatocyte, and it is occupying the space of Dizzy. This blue area in this diagram is basically the space of Dizzy, and the lymph which is formed as a result of the hepatic sinusoid first accumulate in the space of Dizzy, and then ultimately it goes into the lymphatics. Whenever there is injury to the liver cells, then these hepatocytes, the endothelial cells and other cells of reticuloendothelial system like Kupffer cells, they all get irritated and stimulated, and they produce various types of cytokines like tumor necrosis factor alpha, various types of the interleukins and other types of the cytokines. And these cytokines then stimulate these stellate cells. They also acquire contractile properties, and they start depositing the collagen, the extracellular matrix. Normally the basement membrane of these sinusoid, it also consists of the extracellular matrix, but it is basically type 4 collagen. But now the collagen which is deposited as a result of this irritation and injury is type 1 and type 3 type of collagen, which is coarse and thick and consists of large septa. And as a result of the stimulation and deposition of the collagen by the stellate cells, the whole architecture gets disturbed. The fenestration of the endothelial cells, they are lost. The microvilli on the surface of the hepatocyte, they are also lost, and normal vasculature and smooth blood flow is also disturbed. And this is then the whole pathological picture of the liver cirrhosis. The cirrhosis is a dynamic process, and once you get cirrhosis, it gradually progresses. So patient starts with chronic liver disease, and first you get cirrhosis which is compensated. Most of these patients, they are asymptomatic and they are investigated. They are diagnosed on the basis of investigations or physical examinations, and if the process continues, then they get various types of complications. There is formation of varices as a result of portal hypertension. These varices, they bleed, ascites is accumulated, encephalopathy may be precipitated because of number of factors, and patient gets clinically jaundice. So once these complications they develop, then the cirrhosis is said to be decompensated. And once patient goes into decompensated cirrhosis, he can progress to the liver failure. The death may occur as a result of these multiple complications of liver cirrhosis, especially the variceal hemorrhage. Our patient can develop hepatocellular carcinoma, which has got high mortality. There are multiple causes of cirrhosis, but these are the four major categories: the post-necrotic cirrhosis, alcoholic cirrhosis, biliary and cardiac cirrhosis. Western countries, alcoholism is the leading cause of liver cirrhosis. In the developing countries, the chronic viral hepatitis, hepatitis C, hepatitis B, and hepatitis D, which occurs as a co-infection or superinfection in hepatitis B, they are the major causes. Then small percentage of causes may be because of autoimmune hepatitis, and this fatty liver or non-alcoholic steatohepatitis is again very important cause. Then biliary causes, the obstruction to the biliary passages, either intrahepatic or the extrahepatic, will result in liver cirrhosis. Then any condition which is associated with the right heart failure or obstruction of the blood flow from the hepatic vein to the right atrium in the form of Budd-Chiari syndromes, the constrictive pericarditis, they can lead to cardiac type of cirrhosis. Various metabolic disorders, hemochromatosis, the disorder of iron overload, Wilson disease, the abnormalities in copper metabolism, the alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, and cystic fibrosis. Then some other rare metabolic disorders like galactosemia and tyrosinemia. Drug should always be considered as a possible cause. Alpha-methyl-dopa, methotrexate, and amiodarone. These are three important drugs which are very commonly used, and they can be associated with liver cirrhosis. Syphilis used to be a very common cause, but now it has become rare, and syphilis mainly causes cirrhosis in neonates, not in the adults. And in spite of intensive workup, in 10 to 20% of the cases, the cause of the cirrhosis may not be found, and this category is known as cryptogenic cirrhosis. In Western countries, alcoholic cirrhosis is the commonest cause, and it depends basically on the amount of the alcohol which is consumed and the dilution of the alcohol. And males are less susceptible to the alcoholic cirrhosis as compared to the females. In females, it is considered that consumption of just more than 20 grams of alcohol daily for 10 to 15 years will be associated with alcoholic cirrhosis. And in males, consumption of 40 to 80 grams of alcohol over a period of 10 to 15 years is usually associated with the alcoholic cirrhosis. And one drink of beer and one mixed drink of alcohol contains 10 grams of ethanol. So if the female is consuming just more than 2 drinks and male is consuming about 4 to 6 drinks, so he is susceptible to get alcoholic cirrhosis. And the alcoholic liver injury, it progresses first in the form of fatty liver, alcoholic fatty liver disease, then there is alcoholic hepatitis, and later on you will get alcoholic cirrhosis. The main treatment is obviously to stop the alcohol, because abstinence from the alcohol is the main treatment. If the patient gets any complications, then one has to treat their complications. And one way to assess the severity of the alcoholic cirrhosis is in the form of this scoring system, the DF scoring system, which is calculated on the basis of adding the total bilirubin with the difference of the prothrombin time of the patient and the control, and multiplying it with 4.6. So if this DF score is more than 32, then patient should be treated with glucocorticoids. Another treatment is the oral pentoxifylline, which is inhibitor of tumor necrosis factor alpha. In most of the developing countries, the commonest cause of liver cirrhosis is the infection with chronic hepatitis viruses, especially the hepatitis C, which is worldwide the commonest cause of liver cirrhosis. 80% of the cases of hepatitis C, they can progress to the stage of chronicity, and when they become chronic, then over decades they can progress to liver cirrhosis. And as is commonly said, the hepatitis C is a disease of decades. First decade you will get chronic hepatitis, in the next decade you will get cirrhosis, and then in the third decade you will get the various complications. So it takes about 10 to 20 years for patient of chronic hepatitis C to develop the cirrhosis. And once they develop cirrhosis, then they can rapidly progress to decompensations, and they can also develop hepatocellular carcinoma. In Southeast Asia, hepatitis B is the commonest cause of liver cirrhosis. In adults, about 5 to 10% of the patients who acquire hepatitis B, they can progress to chronicity, but in the younger age and in newborns, 80 to 90% will progress to the chronicity. And obviously the specific treatment is available for hepatitis B in the form of the various nucleotide and nucleoside analogs. And for hepatitis C, when the treatment, only available treatment was pegylated interferon and ribavirin, there was problem, because one of the contraindications to the pegylated interferon is decompensated cirrhosis. So in patient with advanced liver disease, you cannot use this interferon with ribavirin. But with the availability of these directly acting antivirals, which can be safely used in the patient of liver cirrhosis, now the treatment has become much easy, and prognosis is now much better for cirrhotic patients with underlying hepatitis C. Primary biliary cirrhosis, the old terminology, now it is called primary biliary cholangitis, because all these patients, they don't progress to the cirrhosis, and basically the problem is involvement of the small biliary passages. Exact etiology is not known, but ultimately most of these patients, they will progress to the end stage liver disease, and main abnormality is the presence of antimitochondrial antibodies, which is seen in 90% of the cases. The main feature is the picture of cholestasis, the pruritus, and in addition to the other features which are common with the liver cirrhosis, these patients, they also have hyperpigmentations, and they also show feature of excessive levels of the lipids in the form of xanthelasmas and xanthomas. The specific treatment is not there, and once the patient has progressed to the cirrhosis, the only treatment left is liver transplant. But there are trials of using ursodeoxycholic acid and cholestyramines, and because of the element of obstructions and the deficiency of fat-soluble vitamins, especially vitamin D, the bone disease is very common in these patients, and they should also be treated with bisphosphonates. Another variety of biliary cirrhosis is the primary sclerosing cholangitis, which is commonly associated with inflammatory bowel disease, and again the exact pathology is not known, and the diagnosis is done usually on the basis of the MRCP and other radiological studies. And again, there is no confirmed treatment, and some of the trials they have shown that high doses of ursodeoxycholic acids it may be helpful, but ultimate treatment is liver transplant. Patients with right-sided heart failure, patients with constrictive pericarditis, long-standing congestion to the liver can result in cardiac cirrhosis. This entity has now become quite less as compared to the old literature because of early diagnosis and early treatment of these disorders. Then one has to consider the other metabolic causes, and obviously all these conditions they are associated with their specific clinical features and biochemical abnormalities, and they should be diagnosed. Coming to the clinical features, most of the patients, especially when they are compensated, they remain asymptomatic for long periods of time. The onset of symptoms is usually insidious, and sometimes it may be abrupt, especially if the patient presents with one of the complications. Usually the symptoms are non-specific to start with, in the form of vague right upper quadrant pain, fever, nausea, vomiting, anorexia, malaise, fatigue, and diarrhea. Or the patient may present with more specific features related to complications of the decompensated liver disease, like in the form of ascites, upper GI bleeding, or hepatic encephalopathy. You can have a number of peripheral signs in a patient of liver cirrhosis. There is a long list, and it is easier to consider these signs and stigmata according to the structures and the systems which are involved. You can have neurological manifestations, the gastrointestinal abnormalities related to reproductive systems. Then skin and skin appendages may also show manifestations. There may be hematological abnormalities, cardiovascular and metabolic abnormalities. The commonest neurological abnormalities are hepatic encephalopathy. They can also develop peripheral neuropathies, and this asterixis, which is known as flapping tremors. This is basically the inability of the patient to maintain a sustained voluntary contractions. The patient is asked to extend his arm and dorsiflex his wrist, and patient is not able to maintain this posture, this voluntary contraction of the wrist, and there is dropping of the wrist, and again patient regains the contraction, and so you get the flapping movement like the flapping of the words. This is not specific only to the liver cirrhosis. Any major organ failure can be associated with asterixis or flapping tremors. Like you can see these tremors with respiratory failure, with brain failure, with renal failure, and with cardiac failure. So all the major organ failure, they are associated with asterixis or flapping tremors, but the commonest cause obviously is liver cirrhosis. In GIT, you can have number of manifestations: the anorexia, dyspepsia, nausea and vomiting, changes in bowel habit, constipation and diarrhea, dull abdominal pain, especially in the region of right hypochondrium, and you can have gastritis when patient develops underlying postural hypertensive gastropathy. These patients, they can have upper GI bleeding. Commonly the source of bleeding is varices, but in 30% of the cases the bleeding may occur from the non-variceal sites. And then you can have this fetor hepaticus, and you can also develop the varices as a result of the shunting of the blood from the portal circulation into systemic circulations. And these varices, they develop commonly in the lower end of the esophagus or in the fundus of the stomach, and the hemorrhoids may be another manifestation of these varices. The fetor hepaticus, which is sweet and a fecal type of the odor which comes from the breath of these patients, usually when patient has got very advanced liver disease and is in encephalopathy, and this smell is very similar to smell which is felt when we open the fresh corp or a mice, and because of this reason it is also known as the breath of the dead, and it is basically due to accumulation of the sulfur containing amino acids like methionine. Their metabolism is disturbed, and the accumulation of 6 mercaptons and its secretion in the breath is responsible for this fetor hepaticus. You can have important features involving the reproductive systems. In young females you can have amenorrhea, and in the older female you can have breakthrough vaginal bleeding. The males, they can develop testicular atrophy and gynecomastia because of the excess of the estrogen, and they can also develop sexual abnormalities, impotence and loss of libido, and the scanty sex characters like the XD and pubic hair, they also shows abnormality. This changes in the skin and skin appendages sometimes may be there. The patient may become deeply jaundiced, and the development of jaundice is always an ominous sign in these patients and indicative of very advanced liver involvement. The spider angiomas, which are basically the dilated arterioles, and then the expanding capillaries from its centers, and they invariably are seen in the distribution of spirea vena cava, only on the upper abdomen, on the trunk and on the upper extremities. They blanch on pressure, and they again are due to excessive level of the estrogens. The patients can also develop the bleeding tendencies. The purpura and petechiae, they are very common because of the low platelet count, and that is because of hypersupplenism, and the underlying clotting factor abnormalities will also contribute towards the bleeding in the skin and in the mucous membranes. Another important feature which is commonly seen is palmar erythema, which is punctate erythema seen on the thenar and the hypothenar eminence and on the bases of the fingers. The center of the palm is pale, but its periphery is red and mottled, and because of this redness it is known as palmar erythema. Again, this is very commonly seen in liver cirrhosis, but this is not very specific to liver cirrhosis. Any condition which is associated with peripheral vasodilatation, like patient with advanced COPD, patient with old age, patient with rheumatoid arthritis, they can also have this palmar erythema. Caput medusae, dilated veins extending from the umbilicus, and they indicate obstruction to the portal blood flow. So the blood is diverted back to the umbilical veins and its tributaries, and the blood flow is away from the umbilicus. You can have metabolic abnormalities like hypokalemia, hyponatremia, and hypoalbuminemia. Multiple factors may be contributing towards anemia: nutritional deficiencies, bone marrow suppressions, blood loss from the gastrointestinal tract, and hypersaplinism. They may all be contributing towards anemia. And thrombocytopenia is again very common as a manifestation of hypersaplinism and leukopenia. So these three hematological abnormalities, they are indicative of hypersaplinism because of the splenomegaly as a result of portal hypertension. Because most of the clotting factors, they are synthesized in the liver. Only calcium, which is factor 4, and von Willebrand factor, which is one part of the factor 8, they are not synthesized in the liver. All the remaining factors, they are synthesized in the clotting synthesized in the liver. And because there is no storage of these clotting factors in the body, so these patients, they very commonly suffer from the clotting system abnormalities. Coagulopathy is very common, and prolongation of prothrombin time and APTT is very common abnormality in these cirrhotic patients. Splenomegaly, which sometimes may be moderate to massive, result from the portal hypertensions. These patients, they accumulate fluid, and as a result of these excessive fluid accumulations, they can develop peripheral edema, and they can also develop ascites. Liver cirrhosis is a hyperdynamic type of circulation, hyperdynamic type of states, and the cardiac output is usually increased, and you have high output type of the cardiac abnormalities. Massive ascites, and in addition you can also see the marked wasting and cachectic appearance, which is a common feature of advanced liver disease because of the severe malnutrition. The common investigations which are done as a result of workup and diagnosis, they include complete blood count, where you will find the abnormalities with hemoglobin, with platelet, with WBCs. The prothrombin time and INR will be prolonged as a result of clotting system abnormalities. And the LFTs, the serum bilirubin may be elevated depending upon the severity. Serum albumin obviously will be low. The globulins may be normal or increased, and the transaminase level may be normal or may be slightly disturbed. But in patients with cirrhosis, it is SGOT which is more increased as compared to the SGPT, and especially in patients with hepatitis B or C. In the stage of chronic hepatitis, the ALT is more elevated, but as the patient is progressing to cirrhosis, then ALT is slightly decreasing and AST or SGOT is now increasing. Hepatitis profile, obviously with hepatitis C, hepatitis B and D, and every patient of liver cirrhosis should be followed up for the possible occurrence of hepatocellular carcinoma. So serial estimation of alpha protein every 3 to 6 months should be done. These patients, they can develop abnormal glucose tolerance, and sometimes they can develop even frank diabetes, and especially if the patient is suffering from hepatitis C. So blood sugar estimations, the urea which is normally formed in the liver, its level may be slightly decreased, but once the patient goes into hepatorenal syndrome, the urea creatinine may be high. Similarly, estimation of sodium and potassium should be there, and the diagnostic examination of the ascitic fluid, and especially if we are suspecting the possibility of subacute bacterial peritonitis, spontaneous bacterial peritonitis, it should be done. X-ray chest for any associated abnormalities in the chest, especially the pleural effusions, and ultrasound examination usually is very helpful in assessing the size of the liver, the texture of the liver, the diameter of the portal vein, and the Doppler studies can also demonstrate the pattern of the blood flow, and the CT abdomen, and especially the contrast CT, biphasic or triphasic, if one is suspecting the occurrence of hepatocellular carcinoma. the diagnosis is histopathological, so the confirmation is done with liver biopsy. But now you have non-invasive markers and various types of other investigations like fibroscans done with the transit elastography or shear wave elastography, and they can be helpful to assess the amount of fibrosis and underlying inflammations. So diagnosis of liver cirrhosis is usually made on the basis of clinical, laboratory, radiological investigations, and liver biopsy is usually not required. So which patient you suspect cirrhosis? Any patient with chronic liver disease, any patient who shows abnormalities in the liver functions or in the alkaline phosphatase, and on physical examination, if you find the stigmata of chronic liver disease, the left lobe of the liver is palpable, the liver span is small, there is splenomegaly, or patient shows signs of decompensations. And obviously the lab evidence of liver insufficiency in the form of low albumin, prolonged PT, and the elevation of serum bilirubin, and the platelet count, and the ratio of AST and ALT if it is more than 1. Ultrasound, CT scan, and this is the simple algorithm to approach a patient of liver cirrhosis and how to investigate. We will discuss in detail the various complications of liver cirrhosis in the next lecture, but the important complications, they may result from the portal hypertension. You may have hepatorenal syndrome, hepatic encephalopathy, hepatopulmonary and portopulmonary syndromes, and malnutritions. And one dreadful complication is the development of hepatocellular carcinoma. You can have coagulopathies, advanced bone disease, osteopenia, osteoporosis, osteomalacia, and various types of hematological malignancies. The management is specific treatment. If you are able to find out a cause, so you should take appropriate measures to correct that underlying possibility. Otherwise, conservative management with special attention to the diet, to the sodium intake, and to the fluid intake, and we will discuss in detail when we will be talking about the ascites. And if the patient has got established cirrhosis, then obviously the treatment of complications, and every patient of cirrhosis should have follow for two main abnormalities. One is for the hepatocellular carcinoma, and the second is for the worsening of the portal hypertension. And this is the common Child-Pugh Turcot scoring system, which is used to assess the severity of the liver disease. It is based on 5 parameters, 2 clinical, ascites and encephalopathy, and 3 biochemicals, and each parameter is, depending upon the severity, is given a score of 1, 2 or 3. In the end, we sum up the total scores, and if the patient has score of 5 to 6, he is put in class A, child class A. 7 to 9 score will be class B, and score of 10 to 15 will be class C. So patient with class A, they are in the compensated category, and class C patients, they are in the decompensated category. Another scoring system which is commonly used, especially to set priority for the liver transplant, is a complex scoring system, MELD scoring, model of end-stage liver disease, and you have to use the computer to calculate the score. So in the end, this is the ABC of the cirrhosis, and this should be applied to every patient you see with cirrhosis. You assess for the ascites, it is present, or if there is past history of cirrhosis, and then you have to make advices on the salt and on the oral fluid intake. you should be asking for bleeding from the esophageal varices. When was the last gastroscopy done? And obviously there is role of beta blockers, the non-selective beta blockers, for the prevention of the bleeding. Their role in primary and secondary prophylaxis we will discuss later on. C. Cancer screening should be done every patient. Ultrasound and alpha pyroprotein should be done every 3 to 6 months. And then D is stand for the various drugs. Detailed inquiry should be made for all the possible drug causes. Then the use of diuretics should be with precautions, and especially during the hot weathers. And special attention should also be paid to the diet. Low sodium diet and protein restriction only if the patient is showing features of hepatic encephalopathy. Otherwise, the patient should be given a high protein diet, about 1 to 1.5 gram per kilogram body weight daily. E is for encephalopathy, and there is also disturbing of sleep-wake cycle, which is the early manifestation of hepatic encephalopathy. And the future should also be considered whether this patient should be managed palliatively or he should be undergoing transplant. And then get off alcohol and other possible offending agents, the NSAIDs, the proton pump inhibitors, and the other hepatotoxic drugs. There should always be a high suspicion for the underlying infections and sepsis, because the liver cirrhosis is associated with a state of depressed immunity. The functions of various reticuloendothelial system, especially the Kupffer cells and other cells, is also depressed. So these patients, they are more prone to get infections, and sometimes the clinical manifestations of these infections may not be there. Every patient with ascites, with tense ascites and constitution symptoms should be considered for spontaneous bacterial peritonitis, and similarly the possibility of sepsis should also be kept in mind. And last, this patient, they should be given immunizations against hepatitis B virus if the cause is hepatitis C or some other cause, or immunization against hepatitis A virus, because superimposed infection with these viruses can always worsen the prognosis and the overall outcome in these patients of liver cirrhosis. So thank you very much.